Good evening and welcome to our monthly series, Words for Palestine. My name is Riwa Zinati and I'm the Curator of Public Programming at the Arab American National Museum here in Dearborn, Michigan. Before we begin tonight's program, I'd like to ground us with an acknowledgement that the Arab American National Museum resides on the ancestral and colonized lands of the Anishinaabe peoples, known as the Three Fires Confederacy and of the Wyandot people. To acknowledge this land and its original peoples is to recognize its longer history and our place in that history. We also confirm that we at the museum are actively cultivating relationships and partnerships with the Indigenous communities within and around the museum to honor and learn from them. The Arab American National Museum resides within the region with the highest concentration of Arab Americans in the nation, and it is the first and only museum of its kind in the US devoted to recording the Arab American story in its full range, richness, and diversity. It is now September, and we're almost a year into one of the deadliest aggressions of the 21st century, the absolutely preventable genocide of our Palestinian families. Today, people discuss last night's presidential debate with future leaders competing on whose presidency is able to kill more of us, while uttering words like ceasefire and Israel's right to defend itself in the same breath. Words matter, and those who continue to annihilate us know this they know this all too well, which is why we will never stop talking and writing to and about Palestine, which is why Words for Palestine exists as a way to also bridge solidarity with our families in Palestine and to raise funds for PCRF and Palestine Legal, which is dedicated to protecting the rights of anyone who speaks out for Palestinian liberation in these United States. So please feel free to donate to one or both of these necessary organizations, as you'll find the QR codes on the upper right-hand corner. Before I introduce our first reader, I'd like to thank our partners Mizna, Rawi, Palestine Rights, and Al Nadwa Free Thinking Society, as well as our artists whom you'll hear from tonight, as we celebrate both Tariq Dobbs' new book, Nazar Boy, as well as Saba Karamati's self-mythology. Mabruk to both of you, and thank you for all the work that you do and you continue doing. I'd also like to invite the audience to drop any questions that they would like to ask the readers in the chat, so that we could take those questions up at the end of the reading. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Noor Hindi, our first reader, to the screen. Noor Hindi is calling on you to join the global fight for the survival and liberation of Palestinians and all oppressed people. Anywhere and everywhere you are, you can disrupt, advocate, speak out, and refuse in small and big ways. Revolution until freedom. Hindi is a Palestinian American poet. Her debut collection of poems, Dear God, Dear Bones, Dear Yellow, Haymart Books 2022, was an honorable mention for the Arab American Book Award. She's currently editing a Palestinian poetry anthology with George Abraham coming out in 2025, also by Haymarket Books. Follow her on Instagram at Noor K Hindi. Welcome, Noor.
Thank you, Rewa. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm really excited to be here to celebrate Tariq and Saba's books that are wonderful. And I'm going to read 2 quick poems and then pass the mic. This one is entitled And. Sorry, I'm like splitting screen. Okay. It was the child dancing with no regard. No. The year began, and I was already wearing someone else's shoes. No. The year began with a punk at the bar, and dear God, I feel closest to you when my heart sounds like a dog being put down. No. The year began, and the face of everyone I love was so sweet and so blurry, and it started in platform Doc Martens, and I was drunk enough to slip into the wrong ones and leave. No, the year began, and I waited for a text, and I started saying, Inshallah, like, Inshallah, my brother doesn't kill himself. Inshallah, I keep my job. Inshallah, I see the ocean. Inshallah, Inshallah, I visit Palestine. Inshallah, no. The year began with a pretty girl at a bar and me reading Surat Ash-Shams to her. No, the year began in a freeze, an ice coating my front porch, and that shovel I used to fracture every crystal, and that phone call at midnight, and that gun. No, the year began with a letter to my ex asking if she still wore her stupid eyeliner like a wing, if she still loves the moon, if she still drinks Grey Goose vodka when she's lonely. No, it began in a rainstorm. Nothing purer than mud, an oath to the sun, the scent of Yasmin on a walk. No, the year began with Yasmin teaching me how to dance with my shoulders, with my therapist repeating, "It's not your fault," with a 10-mile run toward anywhere but here. No, the year began with a rope and a perfect knot. Nina Simone's whiskey voice spilling over my car's dashboard. No, it began with a dirbeke, a high-pitched squeal in the tips of my fingers, a text that reads, "The moon is so pretty," and dear God, I offered her her heart back, and dear God, I thought my mother would blame me, and dear God, the year began with a hand on my shoulder, so steady, so tender. I learned we are capable of anything, and dear God, I gave the shoes back, one size too big and definitely too clean. And so the year began, and I returned everything that isn't mine, not even this life, not even the things I love, not even my shame. And dear God, I feel empty. Thank you for listening to that. I'm going to read one more that was published in Kokosh Review, that Ghinwa Johari's literary journal, and I was reminded of this poem a couple weeks ago. And it's a short one. I ate the sun for breakfast, and now we're in hell, hell, hell. Confession. I overwatered the plants, and now they're dead. Confession. I tried to love the moon, but decided I'm afraid of intimacy. Confession. I am trying to build a tiny museum of light for everyone I've ever loved. I'm sorry I overwatered the plants. I'm sorry. I over watered the plants, I over watered. Oh God, oh fuck, I over loved. I ever loved. I am trying to learn to love a thing means letting it go, go, baby, I'm gone. God, gold, and people die every day. And while standing in line for death, I hoped to hold your hand. I hope for sunlight streaming in my living room, laughter in the kitchen, confession. I've been reckless with my days, my beating heart, confession. I wanted to be your only source of light, my love. What is your mother's name? What warmth created you? When was the last time you cried? What sounds does your body make when it's lonely? Somewhere the streetlights are turning off, 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 and my heart is that marigold you once handed me, the one I failed to keep alive. Do you remember? Thank you. This poem steals a line from C.A. Conrad. And now I get to introduce Saba Karamati, and whose book, Self Mythology, we will never forget. Here is her official bio. Saba Karamati is a Chinese Iranian writer from California. She is the author of Self Mythology, University of Arkansas Press 2024, selected by Patricia Smith for the Miller Williams Poetry Series. Saba holds degrees in English and creative writing from the University of Michigan and UC Davis, where she was a Dean's Graduate Fellow for Creative Arts. She is the poetry editor for Sundog Lit. Please give a round of applause for Saba.
Thank you, Noor. I just want to say I'm really happy to be here with this group of poets. The last time we were all together in a room, it was October, and together was really special. And today I'm kind of reckoning with the fact that our country has spent the last 23 years manufacturing consent for the current / ongoing genocide in Gaza. We live in a world where politicians are more afraid of losing funding than they are standing up to genocide, and a world where weapons manufacturers are praised for the largest bombs they create, the ones that make craters in the already scorched earth. And I waver daily between words are not enough and words are all we have. But tonight we're gathered for words, and we are celebrating art and books by comrades and like-minded poets. And we were so lucky to hear new work from Noor. And the Arab American National Museum is uplifting Palestine Legal Fund and the PCRF as donations. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here. So thanks, y'all. In honor of Noor reading a new poem, and then hopefully George reading a new poem later, I'm going to start with a new poem. It doesn't have a title yet, so bear with me, but here it is. He lies, she lies, the government all lies. Countries founded on lies, wars justified by lies, fabled lie, trickster lie, villains lie to children. It was just a joke is always a lie. A predator lies in wait. Time is a lie, money a lie. The price of eggs is a lie. All that is deemed valuable is a lie. Holy leaders lie, elections lie, AI a lie, the law a lie, what's right and wrong is all a lie, humans lie, I have lied, innocence too a lie, everything is lies except sex, which is power. Power is not a lie, but it thrives on them. I have had sex with liars, and I've lied about sex. I've lied to my loved ones and also to the IRS. I refuse to feel guilty for lies that have helped me. I've said I have none when I've been asked for money. I've never lied in a court of law, but I would. I've lied to my parents, and I've lied to my God, who is a lie I've invented. I've lied to my hunger and to my heart. So much of what I've been taught is a lie, is to lie down and take it. Thank you. I will read from my book now, Self Mythology. And yeah, oh my goodness, the last time we were all together, this wasn't even out yet. So I'm super, super honored to be asked to read here and to get to hear Tarek's work from their book later tonight. This poem in my book is called World War III is Trending on Twitter. With every news outbreak, I think to write about war, but I don't know enough. Freedom as a word disgusts me. Its underbelly danger, colonialism, dirty secrets hidden from the citizens it's sworn to protect. Citizen, too, a word that can be taken away. The words, the safety, the deep, shameful thought buried in the back of my mind. I am an American, though I have never liked that about myself. It is true. The word America, a shield I never wanted to carry. Yes, my parents lived through wars and revolution. The key word is lived. Sought refuge so I could learn to write in English. The word war is one of soft sounds in the mouths of those who have never heard bombs. Thank you. I'm going to read a poem that takes place in Michigan, at a museum in Michigan, not the Arab American National Museum, which is a beautiful museum, but actually at the Detroit Institute of Arts. And it contains a line, or borrows a line, I guess, from Mahmoud Darwish, translated by Fadi Judah. Inside the museum, a remnant, a simple bowl, blue and white, my shadow self mirrored, a shape without features, chrysanthemums around the edge, the materials Iranian, the pattern Chinese. Did I exist before this moment? In the glass, I am the bowl, a simple bowl, blue and white. This, a part of my own history I did not know. In museums, I do not always read the fine print. A simple bowl, blue and white. Today, it is imperative to pay attention. At some point in time, my father's country met my mother's, traded with each other. A simple bowl, blue and white, delicately crafted, that which centuries later would find me. I am not well versed in history. I cannot tell you why this bowl exists. To eat is too simple an answer. A simple bowl. To wait, buried, until my eyes rested upon it. We call impossible things miracles. For the first time, I feel less impossible. Miraculous instead is so much of what came before. Caught in the back of my throat is an ancient scream. I admire my own stolenness. There is nothing else. This bowl and me, one taken, one aching to be found. What will we do with what is left of us? Let future historians find me buried in the same place as my ancestors. A country that doesn't exist, never existed. For now, go home, make chrysanthemum tea, tattoo a garland of chrysanthemums around my thigh. My whole life, I have been looking to corroborate my own existence. How many years have I been existing, unaware of myself? A simple bowl, blue and white. Thank you. I just dropped my book. I will read a couple more poems. I will actually read one that is very vulnerable. The last two I just read are sort of anti-American in their ethos, but I do have a poem that kind of considers what we are allowed to feel about our country. And this is called America in Spring. My lover has overturned the earth in our backyard to grow roses for me. I want their water, want to boil their petals in a copper pot like my mother used to do. She learned it from my father's mother, and so it falls to me. It is tedious work, but she would say sweet tastes sweeter after bitterness. When I drop a fistful of dirt, some clings beneath my fingernails. My lover runs the hose for me. Is this the dirt we mean when we say America? The dirt of it so easily washed away? I do not want to believe in the possibility of America that politicians cite, and yet America, you are responsible for me, and I do not mean simply that I was safeguarded to you. My parents crossed bitter oceans for you, so without you, I have nothing to return to. You could cut me in half, send the left side with my mother, right with my father, shape what's missing out of clay from their lands, and still I would not belong. America, do you see my dilemma? I have this body, these words, some dirt, and a future I see within you. The sweet. I want to grow more roses. I want to make more of myself. What altar do I create for my daughter? What questions will she have about you? Here I stand, contradicting myself. America, is that your magic? Thank you. I will read just a couple more. Oh, I forgot I have a 9/11 poem in this book, so I will read it right now since it is the anniversary. This is called After 9/11, We Wonder If We Should Ever Celebrate. Remember, we have done this before. We have stood with our fathers, watched the east. Yes, the sky looks different tonight, and maybe it is. After all, we are still here, still laughing, still jumping. Consider each spark a small firework, each leap a small delight. Listen. Once I was afraid to jump, but my mother did not know. Our hands clasped, my knees buckled while my arm went with hers. My elbow popped out of its house, still creaks like a rusty door hinge when I try to use it. Wednesdays are for truths. Soye, shadow. Sade, simple. Danger lurks in the eye of the fire. We have been jumping over it since we were children. We have landed on the other side of the flame, our feet soft in the sand. Thank you. I read a Michigan poem. I think I will read a California poem, which is my original home. And Michigan is my home away from home. So this is called, if I can find it in my book, oh my goodness. This is called In the Beginning, There Were Fires. When I was a child, I touched a red-hot stove. My mother washed my hand under cool water, kissed my burnt flesh. The skin grew back without a scar. The pain, a memory. Every year, more of California burns. I hear my mother's voice in the fresh earth, asking me to come back home. I flinch from the question. It has burned a blackened heart. If I could reach back under my skin, I know I could touch it, and with my fingertip, make it crumble. Thank you. I will read one more, and then I will be done, I promise. I'm going to read the title poem of this collection, which is Self-Mythology, and its original publication in the Lit Mag world was in Flypaper Lit when Noor Hindi was the editor there. So, Self-Mythology. I learn and I mourn for not learning earlier. The mint grew but was not eaten. A harvest turned to waste. The old brick of this house keeps the wandering night air cold and inside. I cannot fathom my mother before she was my mother. What forgiveness is necessary for someone doing their best? There is no relief, only the swell of an inward tide back toward the self. I learn and I mourn. There is no anger, only truth. only consequence, only I gazing at the past of my own body, the shell of myself melting, meaning I will drip to a future where I am a mother, am my mother, and all is what she helped create. One day, too, my daughter will break upon the shore, and still she will float back. I see it endlessly. Thank you. I am really, really excited to introduce our next reader, George Abraham, one of my favorite poets. I will read their official bio. They are one of my favorite poets, but there is so much more to them. George Abraham is a Palestinian American poet. Their debut poetry collection, Birthright, from Button Poetry in 2020, won the Arab American Book Award and was a Lambda Literary Award finalist. They are the executive editor of Mizna and co-editor of Heaven Looks Like Us, Palestinian Poetry, coming from Haymarket Books in 2025. They just finished their candidacy as a Litowitz MFA MA candidate at Northwestern University, and they have just joined Amherst College's English faculty as a writer in residence this fall. George Abraham, everybody.
Thank you, Saba. Oh my God, that's that entire set was bananas. Wow. Just floored, especially by that last title poem. I'm thinking a lot about I don't know, I guess the weird connective job that I have between Saba and Tariq as the two main attractions. Like we were saying, Noor opened for Saba, I'm opening for Tariq. And this is the poem that came to mind. I've never read it out loud before to a non-workshop audience. And it just, yeah, I'll just go into it. Charts Poetica. When, come dessert time at the fanciest $200 a fish restaurant, I look her in the eyes, daughter of the former CFO paying for dinner, and say, got yourself a nice skid mark on your plate there. The dish was French, which is to say, I've already forgotten its name. Excess, like going back to Ahmed Faris and Shidyak's days, where a 7-page long list of Arabic words for genitals follows the proem to a 2,000-page novel, though at its center the project was always about an unraveling, infinite grief. This, and resisting the colonially mediated consequences of standardizing the Arabic language, its operating logic being a cleansing of language, a reduction of tongues. A century later, when Sanallah Ibrahim was imprisoned for his communist activism, he compressed the notes preceding his post-prison PTSD novel into the space of cigarette papers. After being released and writing the novel, he titled it That Smell, referencing a scene where a fart wafts and disturbs the bourgeois' morning coffee. The vulgar is where the compressed meets the infinite, where the body meets its own mythologization. Decades later, when the Egyptian Ministry of Culture awarded Ibrahim the Arab Novel Award, he refused the prize for, quote, it was awarded by a government that lacks the credibility to bestow it. I can't think of a single American who has rejected, say, the violence of state-sanctioned book awards, poet laureateship, etc., on the grounds of the illiteracy that is the U.S. government. When, in the space of a wealthy university, I thanked the Palestinian for bringing in poems with teeth, he responded, it isn't that Western poetry is apolitical as much as the poems have been cleansed of a politic. Searching for the uncleanest poem to toss in the slush pile of another Stegner fellow, humbled to be Wells Fargo, Amazon, Love is Love, Industrial Complex, Nationally Endowed Poet's Wet Dream. Titles include Capitalism, Eau de Toilette, Total Eclipse of the Chart. At the end of my charting, there was a floor. But where does a chart begin, really? at the doorway between ass and toilet, and the second mind of the gut resisting dairy. At the moment the milk exits the tunnel of the throat, when fluid meets the tongue like forbidden fruit gushing against the gnash of bared teeth, is the gut then a bridge between the mind and heart, or a critique of the mind-heart division altogether? Example: when my father's heart did not kill him, his mind did. The small flare of his stomach saved him from his heart attack, but by the time he passed decades later, his brain was incapable of processing hunger. Example: writing poems is like pooping, a poet told me at a formative moment. Sometimes it flows out of you like lava, other times you need to strain yourself to force it out. Example: the prose poem as a poem of infinite line length until charts in register. To know a disgust over a line about charts as the kind of disgust Americans feel in their guts when they look at a body like mine. How I am seen as dirty before I ever opened my yikes, whereas the only Arabness I've ever known was a kind of cleansing. Olive trees, etc. My father in life, glaring at dogs the way our neighbors would look at him. Let me be the dirty Arab faggot in America's mind, if only for a second. Whereas, instead of knowing queerness as a kind of filling, flesh hardening into flesh, glass slipping into the mucous surface, I've known queerness only as a need to be emptied. I'm back on my bullshit. Lexapro and Strattera cousined each other in the womb of my gut. I climbed upwards through every American word in whole and ended deeply unimpressed. If meaning, as Itel Adnan reminds us, is ephemeral, then doesn't it follow that our vulgarities are doubly ephemeral? How evolution returns us to impermanence. Once, a man held my poems like a vulgarity, called hot-mouthed the speaker chasing the infinite excess of their body. I was raped in the poem. My body compressed before I even opened my mouth. He was American, the kind who identified as Arab when convenient for book awards, etc. Or maybe we're both just trying to touch the infinite in our bodies. Poetry gave me that once. The very real living correlation between the compression of language and the compression of bodies. New York Times, etc. Lucky for me, most of those people wouldn't even look twice at someone like me. I prefer it that way, I think, to be monster in the minds of those who cannot digest my body, let alone its mauled excess, its expulsions. A friend tells me poetry's compression means there's more at stake in language. Is my gravitation towards excess, then, a need to find safety in or despite a language like English? Example: how I've compressed my father into example here, how he's appeared only as harbinger thus far in the body of this text. Some histories need to die. Natasha said that once. In the current state of American letters, most poetry is just confession without craft. A friend overhears from an editor at the world's wealthiest, most endowed literary institution. And isn't confession the opposite of craft? How, when one writes with an inquisitor's gun to one's temple, what comes out is all stakes, all desperation. Confession is the opposite of owning language. Confession is what happens when poets compress themselves into good Americans. Example: suppose instead the poet turns the gun on the inquisitor. Example: suppose the metaphor isn't poems are poops, but poems are sharts. Often, the last word of a poet's first book is indicative of a larger wound with which the writer will wrestle for their whole life. I read this in a tweet once. Stay. The last word of my first book is stay. The poem was about my then living father, who watched the book release but didn't live long enough to read it. Suppose, then, the entirety of my writing revolves around the question of what it means for a Palestinian body to stay anywhere. If you're reading me, I want you to stay. I want you to stay despite my body. Unlike English, which punishes run-on sentences, Arabic tends to operate on the punctuation logic of a comma. In English, punctuation is not merely a border between sentences, but a signifier of affect. In Arabic, affect must exist independent of text, left completely to be gestured towards within the horizon of the body. Like history, some poems need to die, and that death can happen only in the body. I know no ending for this aside from my body. I know no ending besides. Thank you all. I now have the utter pleasure of introducing my good friend, without whom that poem wouldn't exist, without whom my entire next book wouldn't exist. I don't mean that like metaphorically, I mean that extremely literally. This person came into my life at a time when I really, really had the worst post first year MFA experience, and I was having such a bad relationships in my poetry. And I feel like it's like this person and maybe like a handful of other people in the whole world who have entirely saved my life as a poet and brought me back to poetry and reminded me that poetry is infinite and prose could never do what poetry does. And that person is Tarek Dobbs. Who's a Dearborn local writer, Dearborn based, Dearborn born and raised. Tarek is Dearborn, writer, artist, and institution that shall not be named, Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellow. Poems by Dobbs have been appeared in and featured in anthologies such as Best New Poets, Best of the Net, as well as AGNI, American Poetry Review, among others. Dobbs is the director of the amazing journal Poetry Online, which is the most accessible and incredible online space I've seen in a long time, and has served as guest editor of Mizna and Zoe Glacia. Dobbs holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Minnesota and an MFA in art theory and practice from Northwestern. Dobbs is an assistant professor of English and creative writing at Southwest Minnesota State University, and we are here celebrating their debut collection, Nazar Boy, as well as their forthcoming collection, Dearbornistan, coming in 2026 from Haymarket Books. I love you, friend, and it's an honor to be here.
Wow, it's so hard to follow all of that. Thank you so much, George. Thank you, Saba. Thank you, Noor. You're also dear to me. Wow. Yeah, it's incredible to support a home institution. The American Museum is somewhere I grew up going and a place that means so much to me. So thank you so much for having me. I'm going to read two poems that are not from this book, that are from Dearbornistan, which will be my next book. And then I'll read a few poems from Nazar Boy, which is my debut collection that came out in June. The first poem I'm going to read is called Artist Statement. Artist Statement. The lowercase I without end punctuation. The artist comes from a company town. The artist swam in its polluted river. This will be good. The blank page is a canvas. Be more specific. The corporate histories that could be written here unwind. The states of state are mined and undermined. Don't escape from here. The artist's identity politics start to thin out. There's no discussing the artist's philosophies, 2D collage, mixed media aesthetics. Each page is a thirst trap hinged on diaspora, an exoticized mural covering the wall of a hyphen American restaurant. Each reference is a wandering. And yeah, I'm going to read a few erasure poems, which are actually from Henry Ford's basic English worksheets. So these are worksheets that migrant workers in the 1910s would complete as part of their required duty to receive their full $5 workday. And so these are erasures of those English school documents, those worksheets for migrants. So this is Basic English 1. Henry Ford Trade School, Basic English. Notice, the past never takes help. Verb, missing. You, the irregular dictionary. The present was broke, burst, sank, stole, gone, bought. In the blank began the stolen home. Basic English 2. Let's start by looking. Who or what did it? Who threw the stone? The weary streets. Is there an action? Yes. Who did it? Our actor. In this sentence, we might be confused. The wildest dreams of the average individual. Let's check carefully. Does anything happen after we have found the names? Basic English 3. Now let's make use of this system. Find the actor. Once our boys were there first. Applause starts. Most good boys become knights. Smoke rose from the woods. I once stood here. And yeah, now I'll read a few poems from Nasser Boy, which is my book. And I also have a 9/11 poem. And this is a poem I wrote, which is really a collage of audio from 9/11 coverage that aired on 9/12/2001. So it's the ABC News broadcast. I listened to like a whole day of coverage on YouTube. And so this is listening to the news on YouTube with countries missing. They can't push us around. Anything short of a violent response would be useless. The enemy has got to be eradicated. There was no stomach for restraint. I think these people are a bunch of cowards, and I would love blank. A blank worshiper at a downtown mosque supported blank. Can we take out one or two people and be done with it? I don't think so. I don't think we can eradicate an entire culture. Several mosques in the area have received threatening phone calls. When people's passions have boiled over, terrorism is not automatically associated with Islam. Who or what would the blank hit? Would the blank inflict real pain? Or would it just make the blank feel better? Someone is at war with us. The blank loses the moral high ground. The blank suggested whatever happened will not happen soon. There is a strain of extremism there that worries the blank. In blank, the aid workers of the United Nations have cleared out. They paid off their local staff and took their documents. We're going to stay overseas. There's anxiety in the region as a whole, but that is not why a few Muslims would murder so many blanks or why others would applaud their crimes. In fact, the blank is a target because many Arabs see blank as an accomplice of blank. What they believe is the ruthless repression of blank aspirations for land and independence. The most provocative issues are blank's control over Islamic holy sites in Jerusalem, the stationing of blank troops near Islam's holiest sites, and economic sanctions against blank, which have seemed to deprive children of medicine and food. But perhaps nothing has been more infuriating to many Arabs as blank's recent attacks on blank militants using blank-built helicopters as gunships, prompting this kind of Arab response today. Of course, I'm sorry for the civilians. That is the price for everything they did. The streets, the streets have to pay the price for the suffering of the whole world. That rationale may seem irrational, but it is an explanation for yesterday's aftermath, and is shared by many Arabs in the Middle East and elsewhere. It explains nothing and everything. Signing off, ABC News. Okay, and so now to take a small shift, I'm going to read. So much of this book was based on a research trip I did to Safnin and historic Palestine and the West Bank, and just witnessing life under occupation, life under siege. So I'm going to read some poems I wrote while I was in Palestine. So this is a rondo, which is a French form. In 1990, one sunset equalizes the light between a checkpoint control room and a darkened hall to reveal the silhouette of an Israeli soldier. To select the ideal hilltop vantage, Bible panorama, except with motorcycle cops. Raise a diorama, light it up. Is your state a docudrama? Data collection is nonstop. Typical Americana, a topographic paradox. One settler gazes in pajamas, his lit roof, one-way mirror top. Raise a diorama, lighted up. Deconstructing my birth. A white man and my mother shape a name, Tariq or Tariq, one who travels at nighttime, a nomad, a crescent cuddling a star in the Holy Land, a plane to Palestine, a slipping or gasping exit, ascent by ladder, the dream visitor tears moonlight with scorching heat, imitating twilight or landing. Please unlock, the guard points, like my father holding in every regret, my name on my head. A crow dismembers roadkill, the middle of the road, a desert storm and head-on. But you celebrated Christmas, right? You don't really know Arabic. He means a white Muslim thought had crossed mountains. Reflections of red roofs, mint, and solar heaters. My throat outpouring a saltless trench of Lake Michigan. Inserting self into a green line first, pulling in as fragments seep out. Undistinguished before, the self cross-examines the cities visited. A mandate of wounded vanity to memorize the opening of a prophet's cave. The crescent moon nuzzling from homestay. What it means to be Arab and American, like Issa's painted face, to be born with two names, both the night and the lantern. Okay, I'll read a few more, and I won't keep you too long. So this is Mad Honey. I didn't get bees until wartime, until the battlefields bittered our pollen, its gun-powered honey collected from colony to colony, the Lebanon to the Ukraine, my mother's metallic spit, her tongue in the mirror, the great burst coaxing her larynx, invisible, a mandated moment, its promise to history. Along the Black Sea, war was waged, reddened, a hallucinogenic tint to be measured. As always, the dose makes this syrup poisoned. A promise, the bee's dead someday, just like us. Sorry, it's kind of a dark note to end on, but I'll read one more. And this was written while I was hearing, I believe, rockets fired from Israel into Syria, and I remember being really angry because there wasn't even like it wasn't even like on this first or second page of the news that day. It was just like something that was happening, which I'm sure it's just a microcosm of all the things that the occupation gets away with. So this is a Jinn hums in Sakhnin. Will you defeat them, all the non-believers, the plans that they have made? My chemical romance. But I am planning a plan, so allow time for disbelievers. Leave them a while. Quran 86, 16, 17. Up the Galilee, we lay arm in arm, homestay brothers in a twin bed, music of missiles, mortars or martyrs wake, or interceptions now. My brothers always unsure. Is it Syrian? Lebanese? In Fajr's kneel and grow, I see the faded welts on his arms. It's afternoon, he stomps on the block, settling into the men's club, soccer and smoke-filled reminiscing. The Adgili bubbles, my brother, he whispers. I'm growing tired of guilt like this. At the foggy barbecue, he laughs. Here there is no work, only wildfire. On the news, we hear pines planted 70 years ago are kindling, starting to wither, dinners getting later and later. If tear gas and rubber could cure the soil, always a missile would whisper. Tonight, the reporters post a photograph of a doctor bleeding out. Tomorrow, the wounds multiply, go unsewn. My brother hands me his best lighter. I singe the charcoal. It sputters. The Jinn floods out in a flicker of light. The Jinn shows me many moons ago, when the Galilee still stretched, undivided by the hard lines of empire, families crossing freely through its valleys, when the prophet's cave glowed like the crescent sculpture in the town square. I drive us in circles on Nakba Day, reminiscing of night walks home. The Jinn knows it's dazzling, the expanse of this moon, the iron dome in action. Now is the time, it said to me. I must rethink my life. Thank you.